Welcome to Trials, Tribulations and Tea, and today's video is interesting news from the 14th of December 1850. On this channel I share crimes, disasters and unusual reportage. Viewer discretion is advised, and be aware that some content reflects the attitudes and language of the times. My cuppa today is chamomile tea, which is a herbal infusion made from dried flowers, said to aid sleep, but good as a hair rinse too. Settle down with your favourite brew and join me for a day in the past and the news of that day, 14th of December 1850. Our first news item is awful death of a fortune teller. An old lady named Rebecca Swan, the sorceress of Kidderminster, has met with a fearful death. Many years ago she was prosecuted for obtaining money under false pretences from a servant girl, and in revenge she said that the magistrate who convicted her would not live till she came out again. This being one of those coincidences which cannot be explained, was the case. And from that time her skill as a wise woman has been unquestioned by those who wish to look into the future. She would threaten persons that the earth should open under their feet, and was generally believed to be an intimate of Apollyon himself. She had 4 magic dogs, Liverball, Pretty, Victoria and St. John, the latter of which was stolen by some waggish limbs of the law who once paid her a visit. Cats of remarkable size also formed part of her establishment, and were called names of singular import. A splendid Calimanio was the Queen of Sheba, and a large black one, Queen Caroline. The Princess Charlotte died a few years ago. These cats would leap upon her shoulder and purr in her ear, and she then informed her dupes what she chose, pretending to have received it from the cats, who were of course considered as of somewhat questionable character. Amongst other failings, the deceased was very fond of gin, and being well supplied with money by her patrons, would frequently get drunk and pass the night in a chair by the fireside in conference, as she always said after, with the invisible world. On the night of her death, this was the case, and in rising from her chair, it is supposed she slipped upon the fire and was unable to put the blaze out or call for help. Her body was shockingly burnt. On Friday evening, an inquest was held on her remains, and a verdict of accidental death returned. Her neighbours and clients, however, shake their heads and consider that she was brewing some potent spell, and neglecting some usual precaution, was caught at an advantage by old Clutie. In proof of this, they triumphantly point to the disappearance of the cats, who have not been seen since her death, having probably been scared by the noise and hubbub of the strangers who flocked to the house. Our next story is The Exploding Cow. An Inverness paper says that last week, one of the small tenants at Einbow, county of Sutherland, having a cow swollen with overeating of turnips, Mr. Colin Munro, manager, probed the animal, and as he performed the operation, the farmer's wife stood over him with a lighted candle. The heated air or gas from the cow took fire at the candle and blazed up. To the no small astonishment of the parties, it was with difficulty extinguished without doing material injury. Next, a rich scene at Board of Guardians, or how meetings can get out of hand. At a late meeting of the Limerick Board of Guardians, there was a noisy discussion and violent language used for a considerable time, when an awful scene of disorder took place upon Mr. Cullen, Mr. Mackay, and several rural guardians protesting against having a resolution of some importance put at a late hour, 5 o'clock, when most of the guardians had gone away. Mr. Blackall, I call on Mr. Hogan to act independently to put that resolution from the chair. Uproar. There are 15 guardians in the room. Mr. McCarthy, I won't let him. It is illegal to do so after 5 o'clock. Mr. Blackall, don't interrupt the proceedings, if you please. Continued uproar. Mr. Hogan then attempted several times to put the resolution, but was prevented from doing so by Mr. Cullen and Mr. McCarthy. Mr. Shee, oh, the bully work is going to commence as usual. Mr. Cullen, who is talking about the bully work, Shee, but you? Mr. Shee, you had better not beat me. Mr. Cullen, in a threatening attitude and with his fist clenched, I would in a minute, Shee, and thank God I could do it any day. Terrible uproar. Mr. Connell, if you don't put forward the petition, we will have it endorsed and transmitted to the commissioners. When some degree of order was resumed, the chairman put the resolution, which was carried by a majority of 8 to 5, and then the board separated. Next up, mysterious suicide. A suicide of a most distressing and determined character took place in this city on Monday morning by a young man who gave his name Thomas Ware at the Devonshire Arms. Having dined and taken tea with the family, he went to bed at 11, desiring to be called about 9 o'clock next morning as he wished to leave for Bristol. The landlady, however, on going upstairs at that time and having shook the door and called out several times to the deceased without getting any reply, had the door burst open, when on entering the room she found him dead, lying flat on his back, his head under a table, his right hand near his neckerchief, and his left hand placed on his left breast, covering a wound which was afterwards found to have been made by a bullet which had passed through his heart. The room was covered with blood, and a dueling pistol was found near the unfortunate man's left hand, also covered with blood. 2 soldiers who had slept in the next room, only a few feet apart from the deceased, declared they never heard any report of a pistol or other sound to arouse their suspicions. The deceased appeared in excellent spirits throughout the previous day and gave his address as Mr. T. Ware, 33, Stoke Scrolt, Bristol, observing that he was in partnership with A. Davis, watchmaker, Bristol. In the course of conversation, he said that he had made an appointment to attend a ball in this city on Monday. He was well dressed and appeared about 26 years of age. Next up, highway robberies. For a considerable period, hardly a week has passed without some act of plunder being perpetrated in Bangor or in its vicinity. It has been our painful duty to report the cases of no less than 3 individuals who have been stopped, cruelly ill-used and robbed in that vicinity with something like as many weeks, to say nothing of other attempts which had failed, nor of houses and premises that had been broken into and plundered. On the night of Thursday, the 5th inst., Mr. R.M. Griffith, a Bangor merchant, when returning from Penryn Castle, where he had been given some instructions as undertaker, was attacked. Mr. Griffith was riding his pony homewards, about midway between the Park Lodge, when 2 men sprang upon him, and though one of them had seized the bridle reins, by a sudden jerk towards the offside, Mr. Griffith then pushed his pony forward, and finding himself followed, he called loudly for assistance, which, as he was then close to the Penryn Arms, caused them to retreat. 2 nights afterwards, near the bridge on the Langadai Road, a man suddenly sprung from the hedge upon 2 young men who were returning from Bangor to Bethsaida. but finding that they seemed resolute, they were allowed to pass without further molestation. Of course, from the number of robberies that had recently occurred, they were very much alarmed lest the fellows had some confederates further on. It really is high time that some steps should be taken to put a stop to such depredations and to punish the depredators. Well, what do you think of the news that day? My own thoughts are that not much changes in the world. Sad old ladies still die alone. And I think the suicide was more likely an accident. And don't hold naked flames near methane. And meetings can still descend into chaos, but nowadays more likely on Zoom. If you've enjoyed these true life tales, do subscribe, hit the notification button, and I'll be back with more true life stories. Thanks a lot. Bye.